Let me thank Dr. Sareen, Dr. Chagan, and Dr. Aniruddha for inviting me to make this presentation and to join this interesting webinar. So the topic I am asked to cover is on thrombocytopenia in liver disease beyond hypersplenism. Now, we understand not fully about this complicated topic, but let me try to present my understanding of where we are with our current insights into these mechanisms. The human body every day produces and removes a huge number, 100 billion platelets daily to maintain the normal steady state of platelet count. So if you were to think, figure out what would cause thrombocytopenia in a patient with cirrhosis, the likely mechanisms could be decreased production in the bone marrow, could be hypersplenism, or increased removal of platelets. So let me get hypersplenism out of the way in patients with portal hypertension. So in 1980s, there were a series of experiments, reports where this was studied using radio-labeled platelets. So in this particular study, the patient's own platelets were taken, radio-labeled with indium, and put back intravenously. So within 30 minutes, in healthy controls, the platelets would go to the spleen and less likely to the liver. And after 10 days, they remained in the spleen or in the liver. In patients with splenomegaly, these radio-labeled platelets will end up in the spleen and less likely in the liver, and remain so 10 days later. In persons who had splenectomy, these radio-labeled platelets would be largely in the liver 10 days later. So this is the basis of the terminology of hypersplenism, suggesting the platelets are homing into the spleen and the liver in health as well as in these particular disease states. Now, in patients with liver disease and SIRS, systemic inflammatory response syndrome, for example, we recognize this in patients with acute liver failure or ALF, or with acute and chronic liver failure or ACLF. In such patients, how would the thrombocytopenia happen? What would be the likely mechanisms of these three mechanisms? So let me introduce a bit more about von Willebrand factor. I know that most of the audience here is aware of this topic, and the previous speakers have alluded to this. Now, to the medical student, the deficiency of VWF causing von Willebrand disease, the commonest inherited bleeding disorder, is very a familiar topic to the medical student. However, in syndromes of acute inflammation and in liver disease with either chronic low-grade inflammation or acute onset of systemic inflammation, we are faced with high VWF levels. Now, VWF is a blood clotting protein, and it has got both a platelet binding domain and a collagen binding domain binding to the subendothelial collagen in this cartoon. So high VWF levels could potentially be one explanation for thrombocytopenia by binding to platelets. Recently, the high levels of VWF in the plasma has attracted attention as a predictor of survival in patients with cirrhosis. This data has now entered our textbooks, where in outpatient cirrhotics, the VWF levels are elevated 2 to 3-fold in the plasma. They are as good as MELD in predicting survival over 2 to 2.5 year time period. We have shown that in patients with ACLF, the VWF levels are 7-fold higher, as good as MELD, in predicting survival during the hospital stay over an 8-day period. In patients with acute liver injury and acute liver failure, we could show that in patients with rodenticide-induced hepatotoxicity, these levels were 4 to 4.5-fold higher, and is better than MELD in predicting survival over 7 days. The US ALF group across USA with multiple etiologies of ALF have now shown that again, raised VW levels predict survival over a 21-day time period. So this blood clotting protein, which is independent of MELD, both as it's not a component of MELD, and when you take away MELD, without that itself, it predicts survival in liver diseases. Now, VWF is stored inside the Weibel-Palade bodies in the endothelial cell, and it's stored folded on itself. It looks like garden pipes, hose pipe. And let us assume that this endothelial cell is now getting activated by an inflammatory milieu. The endothelial cell now starts putting out these tubules of VWF onto its surface. Now, these ultra-large VWF molecules, which are now secreted from the endothelial surface, being expressed there, would be cut by the VWF cleaving enzyme, that is ADAMTS13, shown as scissors in these cartoons, and an imbalance of increased VW levels and a reduction in ADAMTS13 predisposes to platelet microthrombi. So this is now recognized in a variety of inflammatory syndromes, though initially it was first recognized in the syndrome of TTP, that is thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura. Now let me use the example of dengue infection, a common problem that we face all over India in particular season, where acute thrombocytopenia is a clinical problem that we recognize. And let me use this movie from Finding Nemo to make the point even more clearer. So that this movie ends, as you know, in Sydney, that's the Opera House, and the ocean is full of fish. In fact, if you take a sample of blood from a patient, cubic millimeter of blood has got more blood cells than what we see in the ocean in the macroscopic view. We know they are in thousands to millions. Now, in the presence of an inflammatory milieu, these fish seem to go and hide somewhere. And in an inflammatory milieu, they seem to now go and get sequestered onto the endothelium. Now, if we take a peripheral blood count, 3 days later in the patient with dengue, the platelet counts are low. A few days later, this inflammation goes away. These guys seem to be floating back in circulation. So it's possible endothelial sequestration could be one dominant mechanism why this phenomenon of acute thrombocytopenia happens and then reverses in dengue infection. Now, using the same Nemo language, the finger-shaped projections on these corals shown in this movie is how VWF molecules would look. They are finger-shaped projections coming out of the endothelial cell, which are very sticky, and it's onto these molecules that the platelets would stick. So it is possible that one explanation for acute thrombocytopenia happening in ALF and superimposing in the acute event of ACLF could be endothelial sequestration, which could be onto the liver or to the spleen, and the increased expression and secretion of this endothelial protein of VWF could be one explanation why this could happen. Another explanation could be increased removal of platelets, and they are usually removed by macrophages in the spleen and in the liver. So let me now explain that a little bit more. The innate immune response has got this arms of macrophage activation and sometimes hemophagocytosis as a disease sequelae of an overactive innate immune response. The immune system has got the innate and adaptive components, of which the innate immune system responds within 20 to 30 minutes as the enemy attacks, keeping tab on the generation time of most bacteria. In contrast, the adaptive immune response of B and T cells takes days to weeks to respond. This response for the innate system has to be so rapid And in fact, one of the ways how the system responds is by some of the cells literally go and eat up the enemy. So the cells which eat are called phagocytes, and examples are macrophages. Some guys spray cytokines and then eat them up, are neutrophils and monocytes. And this is a picture of a neutrophil eating up an anthrax bacillus. So in situations of uncontrolled macrophage activation, which can be triggered by microbes or by dead cells or by foreign antigens or xenobiotics foreign to the body, this guy will keep on eating. This guy keeps on spraying cytokines, leading to a situation of increased inflammation, tissue destruction, and organ failure and maybe death. The hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis criteria, diagnostic criteria, HLH, it's quite a mouthful. All of us are familiar with this. Any 5 of these are part of the criteria: fever, splenomegaly, cytopenia, including thrombocytopenia, documenting hemophagocytosis, these macrophages eating up red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, raised ferritin more than 500, etc. are part of the criteria. And this is an example of an Epstein-Barr virus triggered hemophagocytic syndrome, where the histiocyte, that is a macrophage in the bone marrow, has eaten up red blood cell and platelet. Now this question was addressed by the APASL ARC Research Consortium, spearheaded by Dr. Sareen in ILBS, where in multiple countries across Asia Pacific region, 615 patients with ACLF who had ferritin more than 500, who met the criteria for HLH. Clearly, the diagnosis of HLH predicted a worse prognosis in these patients with ACLF. Now, the terminology for, let me introduce one other concept. The terminology for reticuloendothelial system, which referred to, again, some arms of the innate immune response of the macrophage, which is a reticulated cell, referring to its net-like appearance, and the endothelial cell, so reticuloendothelial system, got renamed in the mid-1960s or so to mononuclear phagocyte system. So where, for example, the cells are macrophages, monocytes, and neutrophils. Now, these are all components of the innate immune response. So if we keep our eyes open, we can start recognizing these systems being activated in our patients. In this study, we had looked at 50 patients with severe alcoholic hepatitis, and that's their discriminant function and MEL scores. And we could show that the reticulo, that is a macrophage activation by the particular criteria for macrophage activation markers, were present in a majority or all of the patients, depending on which parameter we studied. They also had the endothelial activation, that is raised VW levels in these patients. And again here, these high levels predicted mortality. So reticuloendothelial activation is a phenomenon which is present as part of the innate immune response in this patient with ALF. In this particular study, the patient with severe alcoholic hepatitis also met criteria for ACLF. It's also possible, it's recognized now, that platelets can be removed in acute inflammation by the hepatocytes per se in sepsis. Now, in this particular study, the authors used an in vitro model of pneumococcal sepsis. So they have stated that liver is the major site of platelet clearance in health, and in health, the cells which remove the platelets are the Kupffer cells, the resident macrophages in the liver. While in sepsis, they could show that it is the hepatocytes which now remove the desialylated platelets, which are recognized by the asialoglycoprotein receptor, the ASGPR, on the hepatocyte surface. And this in turn, this desialylated platelets being recognized by the ASGPR triggers in the hepatocytes and taken up by the hepatocytes, triggers the synthesis of thrombopoietin, which in turn sends signals to the marrow to produce more platelets. that is the same thing. That is when the platelets get desialylated, they are recognized by the A-sialoglycoprotein receptor and activating the JAK-STAT pathway, thrombopoietin secretion from the hepatocyte, which stimulates the marrow to release new platelets. So it's possible that in patients with ALF and ACLF, thrombocytopenia could be explained by either increased endothelial sequestration of platelets, for example, endothelial protein of VWF being expressed or secreted from the endothelial cell, which are onto which platelets get stuck to, or by increased removal by either Kupffer cells in the liver or by hepatocytes in scenario of sepsis. Now, keeping these likely mechanisms in view, can we look at 3 patients with dengue-induced thrombocytopenia who had, as you know, dengue is a phenomenon, is an illness where thrombocytopenia is very marked. And these patients had, all 3 patients had either severe or moderate thrombocytopenia. All 3 patients met criteria for HLH, hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. In fact, one patient had a bone marrow which also showed hemophagocytosis. They all had raised ferritin and VWF, so they had reticular endothelial activation, and as well as acute liver failure and multi-organ failure. All 3 patients were treated with plasma exchange and low-dose steroids, and 2 patients survived, 1 died. But if we look at these parameters, we can see it going in the direction where we feel that this treatment appeared to benefit. Now, this imbalance of low ADAMTS13 raised VWF is now been described in different conditions, different systemic inflammatory syndromes. The study from Indonesia studied children with dengue, where those who had dengue hemorrhagic fever or shock syndrome had marked imbalance compared to healthy controls. So it appears that in patients with dengue, it is preferable to avoid platelet transfusion if possible. And one could consider, if you were to transfuse platelets, to transfuse fresh frozen plasma, which is ADAMTS13 supplied through that, prior to giving platelets. But maybe this is the first line to consider. So how does plasma exchange work in liver failure? I'm not going to the topic, but we have some thoughts about it. Now, this is a treatment increasingly done at our institution, in our department. Now, every week, more and more patients are undergoing plasma exchange for liver diseases, something which we were not doing prior to 4 years. We could divide plasma exchange depending on the volume of plasma used into high volume, which is described by Larson et al., standard volume, study by Raki and colleagues from ILBS, while we have preferred to use low volume plasma exchange. And for lack of time, I'm not going into it. So in this one patient, where patient had acute liver failure due to drug-induced liver injury, underwent 2 sessions of plasma exchange, one sees that the course of the illness here, the platelets drop by week 1 and has normalized by 3 months' time, while the VW levels to normalize again to 3 months. So what happened in dengue, thrombocytopenia, and VW levels over 3 to 7 days happens over 3 months' time in these patients. So the last 2 slides, which patients are we selecting when we select them with acute liver failure, liver disease syndromes for plasma exchange and low-dose steroids? So they should have an organ failure, organ dysfunction. So they're either acute liver injury, liver failure, or ACLF. They have evidence of reticular endothelial activation, which we recognize by raised VWF and ferritin levels. So thereby, the raised ferritin levels shows the reticular, the macrophage activation, and the raised VW level shows the endothelial activation. And there are some publications in this area where we've tried to explore how plex plasma exchange could be helping in these syndromes. And I would like to acknowledge Professor Elvin Elias from Birmingham in UK, who has guided our discussion in this regard. Thank you.